Most people burn out loudly, a breakdown, a slammed door, a dramatic exit. Mine happened quietly, the kind of quiet that builds up over years and pretends to be discipline. For 11 years, I didn't take a single real holiday, not because I loved the office more than the ocean, or because spreadsheets were more relaxing than sunlight, but because someone had to hold the department together, and that someone always ended up being me. When you're that guy long enough, people stop thanking you. They start assuming you'll always be there. It wasn't in the job description, but it might as well have been be available, be reliable, be the one who fixes what other people break, be the adult in the room. And I played the part. Nights, weekends, the occasional Sunday emergency call that turned out to be my boss forgetting how to sort a column in Excel. I didn't complain. I didn't ask for a promotion. I didn't even ask for a raise. I asked for 1 week off. It happened on a Wednesday morning. I walked into my boss's office with a printed request form, because our company still likes paper for things that should be digital. And I said calmly, I'd like to take a vacation next month. 1 week. My first one. He didn't even look at the form. He just leaned back, crossed his arms, and smiled the way people do when they think they're about to deliver wisdom. A vacation? Now? You know how things are. Senior staff stay available. You're too important to disappear. Too important to disappear, but apparently not important enough to actually treat like a human being. I didn't argue with him. Arguing with someone who thinks being overworked is a compliment never leads anywhere good. I just said, the team can handle it, and walked out before he decided to make the conversation personal. 2 hours later, the HR system pinged. Request approved. Not by him, by auto policy. 11 years without leave triggers an exception approval by default. A policy I didn't even know existed. Funny how companies write their own warning signs and then never read them. I told no one I was leaving. I didn't make an announcement. I didn't post about it. I just packed a backpack, turned off my work phone for the first time in a decade, and drove to a quiet town 3 hours away. A place with no meetings, no crises, no fluorescent lights. Day 1 felt like detox. I slept longer than I meant to and felt guilty about it. The guilt that only long-term overwork can carve into a person. Day 2 felt like breathing. Day 3 felt like remembering I was a person. And at 9:14 a.m., on that third morning, while I was sitting on a small balcony with a cup of coffee and a view of the lake, my phone buzzed with a name I didn't expect. From corporate HR subject, termination notice. For a moment, I thought it was a mistake. Some wrong inbox, some automated message. Then I opened it. Your employment is terminated effective immediately for failure to adhere to availability expectations during a critical operational period. Return company property within 48 hours. I read it twice, then a third time. Not because I didn't understand it, but because of how fast my brain connected the missing pieces. My boss didn't want me taking a vacation. He couldn't stop the system from approving it. So he found another way. I sat there with the phone in my hand, the morning sun on my face, and the absurdity of the situation settling into something sharper. 11 years of loyalty. 11 years of showing up. 11 years of carrying other people's weight. And this was the thank you. But here's the thing. I wasn't angry. Not yet. I was calm. The kind of calm you get when a decision is made for you and you realize it may have been the right one all along. Because while I didn't know it that morning, far from the office, with a coffee that finally tasted like something, my boss had made a mistake much bigger than firing me. He'd put something in motion that he couldn't stop. Something the board had been quietly watching for months. Something they were finally ready to act on. All I had to do was go home and let the truth catch up to him. Driving home after the email felt like watching a movie I'd already seen but couldn't remember the ending to. Not dread, something else. Something closer to recognition. Like part of me had known this was coming for a long time. When you spend 11 years keeping a department alive, you learn its rhythms. You know when something is broken. You know when a mistake wasn't an accident. And you definitely know when someone has been preparing for your absence. I pulled into my driveway just before sunset. My work phone, the one HR said I needed to return, sat on the passenger seat, silent. It hadn't rung once since the email. That was the first sign. Because normally, by noon on any given day, I'd have at least 5 quick questions, 2 urgent issues, and 1, "Did you see my message?" from my boss. But today, nothing. Inside the house, I dropped my bag, plugged in the phone, and stepped into the kitchen. The quiet felt heavy. Not peaceful this time. A different kind of quiet. The kind that means someone has already started rewriting a story you're still living. At 7:30 p.m., my personal phone buzzed. Unknown number. Call me ASAP. Important. It was our senior accountant, Nina, someone who always double-checked the numbers twice before speaking. I called her back. She didn't bother with hello. "Did you quit?" she asked. "No, I'm fired, apparently." She exhaled sharply. "Then something's off. We were told you resigned, effective immediately." "Resigned?" I repeated. "Said by who?" "Your boss? He told us Friday night that you'd stepped away to pursue other opportunities?" His words. That was the second sign. My boss had laid the groundwork before I even left for vacation. Nina continued, lowering her voice. "Listen, I shouldn't be saying this, but things have been weird for weeks. Meetings without you, project files being moved under new names. He's been mentioning department restructuring." I leaned against the counter, letting it sink in. Restructuring. Meetings without me. Project files under new ownership. It wasn't an impulsive firing. It was an erasure. A rewriting of 11 years. "Nina," I said, "why are you telling me this?" "Because I'm not getting pulled into whatever he's doing. And," she hesitated, "the board has been asking questions. Quietly." That word again. Quietly. "Questions about what?" I asked. "Timelines. Performance claims. Ownership of deliverables. The usual. When someone suspects someone is padding their numbers." Padding their numbers. I didn't have to ask who. I thanked her, told her to stay out of it, and hung up. I'd been fired illegally. You can't terminate someone for taking approved leave. But the legality wasn't even the shocking part. The shocking part was how cleanly the narrative had been prepared. I opened my laptop, logged into the company portal, access still active, and started checking activity logs. My boss had reassigned. Every major contract I'd handled, every client escalation I'd resolved, every long-term roadmap I'd built, every KPI sheet I managed, all to himself. The timestamps were telling. 5 days before my vacation. 2 days before my request was auto-approved. 1 hour before he told the team I had decided to move on. This wasn't spontaneous. It was a planned removal. He hadn't been waiting for me to leave. He'd been waiting for a reason to make it look justified. By 10 p.m., I had a folder on my desktop labeled "For Later." Performance records, email chains, version histories, handovers I'd written that documented his lack of involvement. Not for revenge, for truth. Because if there was one thing I knew about our board, it was this. They didn't care about loyalty, or hours worked, or burnout. They cared about numbers, and numbers don't lie, unless someone changes them. At midnight, my work phone lit up. This time it wasn't HR. It was my boss. I let it ring, and ring, and ring. Then it came. The voicemail. "Hey, call me when you get this. There's been a misunderstanding. We can straighten this out. Don't escalate anything." There it was. The third sign. Fear. He wasn't calling because he made a mistake. He was calling because something in the machine had jammed, and he needed me to pretend it didn't. I played the message again, listening not to the words but to the pauses between them. I'd heard that tone before, the panic someone gets right after they realize they've pushed the wrong domino. I didn't call him back. Instead, I shut off the phone, put it in a drawer, and sat in the dark for a minute. Not angry, not panicked, just deciding. because something Nina said kept echoing. The board has been asking questions. If the board was digging, they wouldn't be looking for emotions. They would be looking for data. Data I had. Data he didn't want them to see. I closed the laptop, exhaled, and made a choice that felt like stepping over a line I should have crossed years ago. Tomorrow, I wasn't going to HR. I was going somewhere else, somewhere higher, somewhere he couldn't control, and I didn't yet know what I'd find. But I knew one thing. My boss hadn't just fired me. He'd given me permission to finally tell the truth. I didn't sleep much that night, not because of anger. That part of me had burned out a long time ago, but because the pieces finally made sense when put together. Like a blueprint I'd been staring at for months, but only now understood. In the morning, before the sun was even fully up, I shaved, put on a clean shirt, and drove to the office. Not inside, not to my desk. I drove to the building across the street, the one with tinted windows and a quiet lobby that most employees never had a reason to enter. The board offices. No one visits the board. People get summoned by the board. I wasn't summoned. I came on my own. At 7:58 a.m., I approached the security desk, handed over my ID, and said a sentence I never thought I'd say. I need to speak with a board liaison. It's regarding falsified performance documentation. The guard blinked, checked his monitor, and made a call. He didn't ask questions, because that sentence doesn't invite questions. It invites protocol. 2 minutes later, an assistant appeared, early 30s, sharp suit, tablet in hand. Mr. Hale, come with me. I expected to sit in some waiting area. Instead, she led me to a small conference room on the 12th floor. Glass walls, one long table, a screen built into the wall. She set her tablet down. Before we begin, I need to ask, do you have documentation of the claims you're about to make? Yes. Is any part of what you're reporting based on personal conflict or workplace disputes? No, only on verifiable data. She nodded, clicked her tablet, and said something I didn't expect. The board has had concerns about your department's leadership for months. You may be providing the final missing piece. I sat back. Months. So it wasn't just me who felt something was off. It wasn't paranoia. It wasn't burnout. It was rot. Quiet, polished rot. She projected a document onto the screen. Internal audit notes. Red flags. Unresolved discrepancies. KPI inconsistencies. Project ownership lines changed without justification. And next to several altered documents was a familiar set of initials. My boss's. I felt a strange mix of relief and heaviness in my chest. Relief that I hadn't imagined everything. Heaviness because it meant I had lived with this truth for years, without seeing its full shape. Mr. Hale, the assistant continued, did you authorize these changes? No. Can you prove that the original deliverables, roadmaps, and escalation logs were your work? Yes. I plugged in my drive. Not a revenge folder, a reality folder. Version histories he couldn't erase. Email chains that documented every handover. Screenshots of dashboards he never even logged into. Client follow-up notes with his signature added months later. And the clearest piece, timestamps showing work completed at 1:02 a.m. on days he claimed the work was his. The assistant didn't react emotionally. She didn't gasp or curse or even frown. She just nodded and said almost quietly, that matches our initial audit. So the board had already begun the process. She tapped the table. Your termination email, do you mind forwarding it? I sent it. She read it once, then again, then leaned forward. This is a violation of company policy. You cannot terminate a long-tenured employee for taking system-approved leave. It appears... She paused, choosing her words carefully. It appears he acted unilaterally, an outside procedure, likely to cover the inconsistencies we found. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt tired. Years of late nights suddenly settled on my shoulders at once, but in a way that felt clarifying. Like finally admitting to yourself the house has been leaning for a long time. She clicked her tablet again. Mr. Hale, the board has a meeting today at 4 p.m. I will escalate this immediately. You may be asked to provide a recorded statement. Are you comfortable with that? Yes, I said without hesitation, because for the first time in 11 years, I wasn't holding anything up anymore. I was letting it fall. I left the building at 9:14 a.m., the same time I'd been fired the day before. Something symbolic about that. Outside, the morning felt colder than it should have. Maybe because clarity always comes with a chill. I got in my car, started the engine, and my phone buzzed again. A text from my boss. Call me the moment you see this. Urgent. I didn't reply, not out of spite, out of understanding. His panic didn't belong to me. On the drive home, I replayed the last few years in my head. The sudden compliments when clients praised work I'd done, the unnecessary coaching sessions he held, not to improve performance, but to make sure I knew where my place was. The jokes at meetings. If you need something done, ask him. He never leaves anyway. People had laughed. Even I had sometimes. But now I understood the joke's shape. It wasn't humor. It was foreshadowing. At home, I made coffee, the same kind I drank on that balcony during my short vacation. But it tasted different today. Not peaceful, metallic, honest. I opened my laptop again, not to collect more evidence, I already had enough, but to look at my old calendar. 11 years of meetings, 11 years of deadlines, 11 years of carrying work that wasn't mine to carry. I scrolled through the weeks, noticing how many events began with urgent, how many quick calls were dropped on me at 7 p.m. on Fridays, how many times I wrote notes for a project he would later describe as collaborative. I let out a slow breath. Burnout wasn't the cause. Burnout was the symptom. The cause was standing behind a podium somewhere, preparing to take credit for one last quarter that wasn't his. Around noon, I received another call, this time from an internal number I recognized, the board coordinator. We've reviewed your documents. We may need you to join us at 3:45 for a brief preliminary session. Of course. Your cooperation is appreciated. The line clicked. Short, professional, controlled. Exactly how the board operates when they're about to tighten something. For the rest of the afternoon, I didn't pace or worry. I didn't rehearse what I would say. I just sat at my table and finally allowed myself to understand something I had been avoiding for years. Hard work doesn't make you safe. Loyalty doesn't make you valued. Consistency doesn't make you protected. It just makes your absence easier to exploit. At 3:10 p.m., I put on the same shirt, same shoes, grabbed my folder, and walked out the door. I wasn't going back to reclaim my job. I wasn't going back to justify myself. I was going back to tell the truth. The party tried to erase, and when I stepped into that elevator on the 12th floor again, something in me finally settled. Not peace, not closure, understanding. The kind that hurts on the way in, but clears everything on the way out. When the elevator doors opened at the 12th floor, the hallway looked different from the morning. Not visually. Same glass, same carpet, same framed mission statements, but in atmosphere. There's a silence certain offices get right before accountability enters the room. I could feel it. The board coordinator met me by the doorway. Mr. Hale, thank you for returning. This will be brief. Brief never means simple. She led me into a smaller room this time. No giant screen, no long table. Just 4 chairs, a round table, a water pitcher, and a closed folder. Inside sat 3 people. A board liaison I'd seen in company all-hands videos, the internal audit lead, and someone I didn't expect, the corporate counsel, the one who normally only appeared during mergers or litigation. They weren't smiling. They weren't hostile, just sharpened. The liaison motioned to a chair. Sit, please. I did. The audit lead opened the folder, clicked her pen, and began. We've cross-referenced your documentation with our internal system logs. Before we move forward, I want to verify 2 details. First, Did you at any point delegate or transfer ownership of your performance deliverables to your department head? No. Second, did you authorize any retroactive edits to project timelines or milestone reports? No. She nodded as if she already knew. The counsel spoke next. Mr. Hale, what we're about to discuss is confidential. If at any point you feel uncomfortable, tell us. But understand, the actions taken against you were not only improper, they may have been designed to conceal policy violations. There it was, the part no one had said out loud until now. Not incompetence, not miscommunication, concealment. The liaison tapped the table gently. We called your department head to this building at 4 p.m. I raised an eyebrow. He doesn't know why, the liaison added. They didn't need to say more. The board rarely surprises people unless the situation is already past the point of saving. The audit lead continued. In the past 3 quarters, your department generated the highest client retention rate company-wide. The reports credited your department head directly. Our audit shows the underlying work originated with your accounts. I didn't need thanks. I didn't need recognition. But hearing the truth spoken plainly after 11 years felt like a piece sliding into place. The liaison leaned back. We watched your handover documentation closely. It aligns with what your clients said during routine check-ins. Clients? Of course. Clients don't care about internal politics. They care about who actually solves their problems. The counsel folded his hands. Mr. Hale, do you know why you were terminated while on approved leave? Yes, I said, because he needed me gone before the audit reached him. None of them corrected me. That was the confirmation. The audit lead slid a packet toward me. 12 pages. This is a timeline we assembled based on your files, system activity, and interview notes. It shows a pattern of reassignment and misattribution starting 14 months ago. These actions benefited him directly during the last 2 bonus cycles. 14 months, a year and 2 quarters. He hadn't planned my removal overnight. He'd been moving chess pieces for over a year. The liaison's tone shifted, quieter, heavier. He terminated you illegally. He misrepresented your status to HR, and he attempted to claim full ownership of a portfolio that you maintained without interruption. I let out a slow exhale. Not anger, not satisfaction, just acknowledgement. The truth was finally in the open. The counsel closed the folder. At 4 we will confront him with these findings. You will not be in the room, but we may call you afterward. I nodded. Understood. The audit lead added, your cooperation has been critical. You've done everything exactly right. That was the first warm sentence anyone from leadership had ever directed at me. They stood to leave, meeting over, and the liaison paused at the door. Mr. Hale, she said, I know this has been a difficult process, but I want you to prepare yourself for something. I looked up. For what? When someone builds their position on a foundation that wasn't theirs, the collapse is not quiet. Not quiet. The words stayed with me long after I left the building. I didn't go home. Not yet. I sat in my car, parked under the only tree in the lot, and watched the board floor through the tinted windows across the street. At exactly 4 p.m., a black sedan pulled up. My boss stepped out, phone in his hand, suit slightly wrinkled, expression irritated, not frightened yet. He walked into the building like a man who thought he still had control. He didn't. Not anymore. I didn't need to see the meeting to know how it would unfold. I'd been in enough rooms with him to know his script. Deny everything, blame miscommunication, pretend humility, offer partial truths to muddy the waters, claim I misinterpreted something, try to negotiate his way back into safety, but this time, the audience wasn't employees. It was the board, council, audit. They don't negotiate with confusion. They don't entertain charm. They look at numbers. Numbers that don't lie. 20 minutes passed. 30. 45. At 5:12 p.m., the board liaison called me. Mr. Hale, it's done. The board has voted to suspend your department head, effective immediately pending formal termination. I closed my eyes, not from relief, but from the weight of inevitability. He attempted to claim ignorance of the edits, she continued. Unfortunately for him, system logs and approvals showed otherwise. Of course they did. He'd prepared the stage, but he hadn't considered the lighting. Will there be further action? I asked. Yes, she said. Legal action, HR action, financial review. You will receive official communication within 24 hours. I thanked her, hung up, and sat there for another minute. No victory rush, no adrenaline, just the quiet understanding that something enormous had finally shifted. And then my phone buzzed again. Not a board number, not HR, a number I recognized immediately. My boss. We need to talk, please. For the first time in 11 years, his message didn't come with instructions, or expectations, or a tone that suggested I owed him something. It sounded like someone who realized the ground under him had given way, but I didn't respond. Not because I wanted him to suffer, because I had nothing left to say. When I pulled into my driveway that evening, the house felt different, bigger somehow, quieter in a way that wasn't heavy anymore, the kind of quiet that comes after a storm, not peaceful, not final, but real. And standing in the kitchen, I finally understood. I hadn't lost my job. I'd lost the illusion that loyalty protects you. Everything else was about to fall exactly where it belonged. The message from my former boss stayed unread on my phone until morning. One line, no punctuation. We need to talk, please. The kind of message you send, not when you're confident, but when the last branch you were holding onto has snapped. I didn't respond. Not to be cruel. Cruelty takes energy. But because the conversation was already over. He just didn't know it yet. At 8:07 a.m., an email arrived from corporate HR. Subject: Employment Status Correction. The first paragraph acknowledged that my termination had been issued in violation of procedure. The second paragraph stated my status was being restored retroactively pending my decision. The third paragraph introduced something I hadn't expected. Compensatory reinstatement package. Details attached. I opened the PDF. Back pay from the date of termination. Full benefits reinstated. A stipend equal to 2 bonus cycles. A formal apology letter signed by the board chair. And the most important line, option to return in a new reporting structure outside your former department. Head option, not obligation. They were offering a clean reboot, the kind companies only offer when they know they've been caught asleep at the wheel. At 10:14 a.m., the board liaison called again. Mr. Hale, I want to personally thank you for your cooperation. Your former department head has been terminated with cause. His access is disabled, and legal is handling the remaining matters. Terminated with cause. The corporate equivalent of a locked door and a deadbolt. What happens now? I asked. We'll let the dust settle, she replied. You have time to decide whether you want to return or part ways amicably. I appreciated the honesty. Companies rarely speak plainly, but yesterday had stripped away all the usual politeness. Before hanging up, she added something quietly. You deserved better years ago. I wasn't expecting that. By noon, the whole company knew. They always do. People pretend confidentiality exists, but nothing moves faster than a story that confirms what everyone suspected. I stopped at a gas station on the edge of town. Coffee, nothing else. And while I stood in line, my phone buzzed with messages from numbers I half recognized. Is it true? Are you okay? We heard what happened. But one message stood out, not because of what it said, but because of who sent it. Nina. He tried to walk out with his laptop and files. Security stopped him. Audit escorted him out. It was loud. Everyone saw. I didn't smile, not out of restraint, but because it didn't feel like victory. It felt like gravity. You can only stack lies so high before they collapse under their own weight. In the afternoon, HR scheduled a video call, a formality, a cleanup operation. The representative was polite, composed, overly careful with her wording, the way people are when the company knows it has stepped directly into liability. Mr. Hale, we'd like you to consider returning. Your role can be redefined. You'd report directly to operations, not to any interim manager. A promotion without naming it a promotion. A gesture to show the board wasn't just correcting a mistake. They were trying to rebuild trust. But trust isn't a light switch. You don't flip it back on after 11 years of being taken for granted. Thank you, I said. I'll think about it. She nodded. She understood. HR always understands when legal is watching. Before ending the call, she added, I'm sorry this happened to you. Simple. Human. The kind of sentence that matters more than a PDF. That evening, Ray and his wife Jenna invited me over for dinner. Nothing official. Just two people who had watched the slow erosion of my life for years, and were relieved it finally cracked open. Ray handed me a plate and asked, You coming back to the company? I thought for a moment. I don't know. Good, he said. That means you're thinking like a free man. We ate in comfortable silence. Halfway through, Jenna said, You're different, in a good way. Maybe I was. Not because of the investigation or the board or the compensation package, but because for the first time in 11 years, I wasn't carrying someone else's weight. The next morning, I took a walk through my neighborhood, something I never had time for. The air felt different, not lighter, clearer. On my porch, I opened the laptop and typed a short email to the board liaison. Thank you for the opportunity. After careful thought, I've decided not to return. I'll sign the separation agreement and move forward independently. Nothing dramatic. No long explanation. Just the truth. I didn't want my old job back. I wanted my life back. By noon, she replied, We respect your decision. Your contributions will be formally recognized in the next quarterly report. We wish you every success. Quarterly report. Funny how things find their proper place when the dust settles. A week later, I drove past the office. The same building, same windows, same people smoking outside on break. But something was different. The parking space where my boss used to leave his black sedan was empty. A small detail, but meaningful. He had built his career on my work. When that foundation was removed, the entire structure disappeared with him. People think revenge feels like fire. It doesn't. It feels like quiet. Quiet when you walk away from a place that no longer gets to define you. Quiet when you start planning your next steps without anyone looking over your shoulder. Quiet when you finally understand your value wasn't tied to the building you worked in. It was tied to the work you did and the person you became doing it. I sat there for a moment, engine idling. Then I put the truck in drive, turned onto the main road, and didn't look back, not once. Peace isn't loud. It isn't dramatic. It isn't cinematic. Peace is finally living a life where no one expects you to carry the weight of their mistakes. A life where effort is matched, respect is mutual, and rest is earned, not feared. And as I drove past the last turn where the office disappeared from view, I realized something simple. I didn't lose anything. I was finally free to build something that belonged to me, not to someone who treated me like a tool in his pocket. And for the first time in 11 years, that freedom felt like the real promotion.